And what if I told you that the true oppressed is not the woman but you? While the whole world repeats that women have been the great victims of patriarchy, a woman, Ester Vilar, dared to expose an uncomfortable truth. Modern man has been tamed like a circus animal, manipulated by women through a strategy as subtle as it is effective. This video is a faithful portrait of Vilar's vision, a German-Argentine psychologist and sociologist who in the 70s shook the world with her book, The Manipulated Man. Prepare for a raw dose of reality, unfiltered, unadorned, just the truth as she presented it. From the beginning of her work, Ester Vilar launches a statement that challenges all preconceived notions of modern society. Man is not the dominant, but the dominated. And the most surprising thing is that he has not only been subjugated, but has learned to be proud of his own slavery, like a trained dog that receives a pat on the head every time it obeys. Man has been conditioned to believe that his function in the world is to serve women without questioning anything in return. For Vilar, the key to male subjugation lies in his programming from childhood. It is not a physical or legal subjugation, but psychological. Men do not need chains or prisons because they have been trained to love their role as providers, protectors, and facilitators of feminine needs. Instead of rebelling, they compete among themselves to see who serves best. They feel brave for working endless hours, noble for sacrificing their desires, and responsible for carrying the weight of others' well-being. All this, according to Vilar, is nothing more than an elaborate and functional trap. This subjugation is reinforced through language, popular culture, education, and moral values. From a young age, boys are bombarded with messages that exalt the figure of the hero who protects, of the father who sustains, of the husband who sacrifices. Meanwhile, girls are educated to receive, demand, and expect. They are taught that they are special just for existing, that they deserve love, attention, and resources without needing to offer anything of equal value in return. Thus, a dynamic is configured where one part gives everything and the other becomes the center of the universe. But how can such a system be maintained without the oppressed rebelling? The answer, according to Vilar, lies in self-deception. Man has been convinced that serving is loving, that paying is caring, that yielding is respecting. Woman, far from being the passive victim of the patriarchal system, becomes the silent strategist, the one who pulls the strings without anyone noticing. She does not need to impose her will openly. It is enough to reward or punish to show approval or disapproval, for man to act exactly as she wishes. Work, ambition, and professional success also form part of this trap. Vilar maintains that man does not work for himself or for an authentic vocation, but to fulfill the expectations of an idealized feminine figure. His motivation is not self-realization, but validation. Throughout his life, he changes women, jobs, and goals, but the structure remains. There is always a feminine figure who demands, directs, and ultimately defines him. And the most painful thing, according to Vilar, is that man has learned to love his condition. He believes that he is being a gentleman, a provider, a protector, when in reality, he is being manipulated emotionally, sexually, and economically. He believes that the woman needs him, when in reality it is he who has been conditioned to need feminine approval to feel like a man. In this first part of The Manipulated Man, Ester Vilar leaves no room for doubt. True power is not held by whoever shouts loudest, but by whoever gets the other to act according to their interests without realizing it. And in the silent war between the sexes, she affirms that woman has won without lifting a single finger. For Ester Vilar, one of the fundamental pillars of feminine dominance over man is sexuality. But it is not a free and spontaneous expression of desire, but a carefully calibrated weapon used to obtain obedience, protection, and resources. In her view, woman does not give her body for love, pleasure, or emotional connection, but as a transaction, sex in exchange for services. The first aspect of this mechanism, according to Vilar, is that woman turns her sexuality into a scarce commodity. She learns from a young age that her value resides in her ability to arouse desire, and even more so, in her willingness to satisfy it or to deny it. In this way, woman not only controls when, how, and with whom she relates sexually, but also establishes the conditions under which that access will be granted. Sex thus becomes a bargaining chip. Whoever wants to receive it must pay with effort, submission, or sacrifices. For man, this dynamic is devastating. Vilar argues that by having a constant and more urgent sexual desire, man finds himself in a position of permanent vulnerability. His natural impulse pushes him to seek pleasure, but that pleasure is under the absolute control of the woman. She decides whether to grant it or withhold it, and each of her decisions conditions his actions. It is, according to Vilar, an elegant and silent form of slavery. Furthermore, woman does not need to be aware of the power she holds. She often acts by intuition, reproducing deeply rooted social patterns. She knows when to dress in a certain way, how to look, how to insinuate, and above all, when to stop to generate expectation. This erotic control does not simply seek to obtain pleasure, but to establish dominance. The woman who knows how to manipulate her image and her gestures can make a man change his plans, his behavior, even his principles, without needing to impose anything with violence. Vilar emphasizes that this system works thanks to the illusion of romanticism. By wrapping sex in a halo of love, commitment, and tenderness, woman manages to make man not perceive the exchange as a transaction, but as a proof of affection. Thus, he feels privileged to have access to the female body without realizing that he is being manipulated to fulfill an endless list of demands. The author goes further by stating that in many cases, marriage is the institutionalization of this dynamic. Once married, man becomes even more conditioned by the expectation of obtaining sex as reward for good behavior. The frequency, quality, and sexual disposition of the wife become tools of subtle blackmail. And if he refuses to play the game, he runs the risk of being labeled insensitive, selfish, or even a bad husband. That is why, in the logic of feminine sexual dominance, it is not based on repression, but on dosage. Woman does not need to say no all the time. It is enough for her to say yes only under her conditions. Man, on the other hand, continues to pursue, striving, desiring, always one step behind a goal that seems within reach but is never completely his. Thus, according to Ester Vilar, sexuality becomes the battlefield where man gives up his freedom in exchange for a promise that woman administers with the skill of a strategist, a promise that keeps him always alert, always willing, always dominated. The true key to male subjugation is not in force nor in law, nor even in seduction. It is in education. Dominance begins in childhood, when boys are programmed as if they were machines to become unconditional servants of women. This programming is not casual or accidental, but part of a cultural system that has been perfected for generations to produce obedient, sacrificial men dependent on feminine recognition. From birth, boys receive messages that exalt the idea of sacrifice. They are told that they must be brave, that they must protect, that they must work hard, that they must not cry. Every gesture of sensitivity or weakness is repressed, while every display of effort is rewarded. Why? Because the system needs men who are willing to carry the weight of the world without complaining. And more importantly, it needs men who believe that this sacrifice is their way of loving. Vilar maintains that this education has a goal: to turn man into a docile provider. To achieve this, he is taught to associate his personal worth with his ability to give, to do, to sustain. Man feels fulfilled only when he gives something: money, security, time, attention, and all this always towards a woman. She is the center around which his entire existence revolves. He does not live for himself, but to be useful, desirable, accepted. And that is only achieved in this logic by fulfilling feminine expectations. Woman, on the contrary, does not receive this type of training, according to Vilar. She is instilled from a young age with the idea that she is special simply for existing. She does not need to prove her worth or earn respect through effort. She only has to wait, demand, and receive. Society tells her that she deserves the best, that she deserves to be loved, cared for, protected. In this way, an unequal relationship is established from the beginning. One is trained to give everything, the other to demand without limits. The educational system, the media, and popular culture reinforce this narrative. Children's stories, for example, show brave princes who risk their lives to rescue defenseless princesses. Movies, songs, and novels repeat the same pattern. The man who leaves everything for love, who suffers for a woman, who transforms himself to be worthy of her. Rarely is it questioned whether that woman has done anything equivalent. The focus is always on male effort. But the most alarming thing for Vilar is that this programming does not disappear with age. The programmed child becomes an insecure adolescent who seeks validation in every feminine smile. Then, an adult who measures his success by the quality of the woman he can maintain. Everything he does, studying, working, buying, competing, has the ultimate goal of attracting or retaining a partner. And if he succeeds, he does not feel free or fulfilled, but even more trapped. Now he must maintain the standard, continue fulfilling, continue serving. Woman, in this scenario, acts as an emotional supervisor. She is the one who sets the rules of the game, who approves or disapproves, who rewards or punishes with words, gestures, or silence. Man becomes an actor who plays the role she has written, and he does so with such deep conviction that he does not even realize he is acting. He believes he is choosing freely, when in reality he is following an invisible script imposed from his childhood. According to Vilar, this type of education has devastating consequences. It not only limits man's freedom, but also alienates him from himself. By living dependent on others' expectations, he loses contact with his own desires, emotions, and needs. He becomes a shadow of what he could be, and all under the appearance of being a good man, a good husband, a good father, in other words, an efficient servant. In this third part of her work, Ester Vilar confronts us with a brutal truth. The system does not need strong men, it needs useful men, and to achieve this, it begins to mold them from day one. If man has been tamed, it is not because he was defeated in a battle, but because he was educated to kneel. Love, that idealized feeling sung in verses, glorified in novels and films, is nothing more than a disguise, a rhetorical resource that women use to exert emotional dominance over men. In her view, love is not a bond between equals, nor an authentic connection between two people. It is a tool, a perfectly camouflaged control device that serves to manipulate masculine will and subjugate it without resistance. From the earliest years of life, man is conditioned to yearn for feminine love. He is told that he will only be complete when he has a woman by his side, that love is the greatest goal of his existence, that his full realization depends on being chosen by a woman who values him. This expectation becomes a kind of emotional hypnosis. He does not seek love for love, but for validation. He needs to be loved to feel that he is worth something. And it is here, according to Vilar, that woman deploys her power. She does not need force or logical arguments. She only needs to insinuate that she loves. That single promise, real or false, is enough for man to start acting irrationally. He changes his priorities, his values, his behavior. He is willing to give up his dreams, his friends, his freedom, in order not to lose that love that has been offered to him as a reward. The most perverse thing in Vilar's reading is that this supposed love is presented as something disinterested, when in reality it is loaded with expectations and demands. The woman who loves demands, and she does so with the legitimacy that affection grants her. If you love me, do this for me. Thus, love transforms into a form of moral blackmail. If man does not respond, he is accused of being cold, selfish, immature. And since he deeply fears losing love, that same love he was taught to venerate as the most important thing, he obeys. Furthermore, Vilar maintains that woman does not love as man believes. She does not love with surrender or renunciation. She loves from a strategic position. She observes what she can obtain, measures benefits, calculates risks. Feminine love is not blind or disinterested. It is a formula, an unwritten contract that only remains in effect as long as the balance tips in her favor. When man stops complying, stops being useful, the supposed love disappears as easily as it came. Marriage, in this context, is the culmination of this emotional deception. It is the moment when man commits himself legally, emotionally, and financially to support a woman who, under the appearance of eternal love, has actually managed to secure a stable provider. The bond is no longer based on passion or even affection. It becomes an agreement where one gives and the other manages. Vilar goes further by stating that love also serves to justify mediocrity. Under the excuse of affection, many women demand without giving, criticize without contributing, victimize themselves to avoid responsibilities. Man, blinded by his need to be loved, tolerates humiliations, endures contempt, normalizes emotional abuse, all in the name of love. In summary, for Ester Vilar, love is a distorted concept, an emotional trap where man is seduced by a promise of fulfillment, when in reality, he is signing a contract of servitude. Woman, with a smile and a sweet word, obtains obedience, fidelity, resources, protection. Man, believing he has found glory, has actually been trapped. This vision may seem brutal, it may hurt, but it is, according to Vilar, a necessary truth. Because as long as man continues to believe that love is an unconditional virtue, he will continue to fall into the same trap again and again. Love, in the hands of an emotional strategist, is not a gift, it is a hook, and man, naive and hungry for affection, always bites the same bait. Emotional manipulation is one of the most powerful and least detectable weapons women use to dominate men. It does not require physical force, nor solid arguments, nor even a position of institutional power. It is exercised in the most intimate and vulnerable terrain, emotions. Woman, says Vilar, has learned to use effective reactions, crying, silence, reproach, tenderness, as tools of psychological control. And man, incapable of recognizing this strategy, falls again and again. According to Vilar, everything begins with the cultural perception that woman is more sensitive, more emotional, more delicate. This image, far from being a disadvantage, grants her a license to use her emotions as a valid argument. When a woman cries, no explanation is asked. It is assumed that her pain is authentic and that man, in some way, is responsible. Crying is not an expression of suffering, but a way to gain power. A single gesture of sadness can be enough to disarm a man trained to feel guilty. The most common resource, according to Vilar, is guilt. Woman, by victimizing herself, inverts the burden of proof. She never has to justify her behavior because her suffering, real or feigned, automatically makes her innocent. Man, for his part, feels that he must repair that damage, even if he has done nothing objectively wrong. Thus, he accepts impositions, yields in discussions, changes decisions, all to avoid making her feel bad. Another powerful mechanism is silence. Vilar defines it as a form of passive-aggressive punishment. When woman does not get what she wants, she does not argue, she does not reason. She simply withdraws emotionally. She does not respond, she does not speak, she does not look. This absence of connection generates in man an anxiety that leads him to seek reconciliation at any cost. Silence, therefore, is not indifference, but a calculated strategy to restore balance, only when she is given her way. Tenderness is also a weapon. Instead of imposing, woman offers conditional affection. I will hug you if you do this, I will treat you well if I please you. She does not say it aloud, but she demonstrates it with every gesture. Affection becomes a bargaining chip. If man acts as she expects, he is rewarded with sweetness. If not, he receives coldness. Vilar maintains that this system conditions man like an animal in training. He associates good treatment with obedience. Even more subtle is the use of emotional drama, exaggerated discussions, shouting, public scenes. All this, for Vilar, is not a sign of loss of control, but a tactic to gain power through emotional intimidation. Man, fearful of scandal or of being accused of being insensitive, yields out of exhaustion. Thus, every conflict ends up being resolved in favor of whoever shouts or cries the most, not whoever is right. Vilar also mentions manipulation through language. Words like selfish, insensitive, immature are used to delegitimize any attempt by man to think for himself. If he decides something that does not please the woman, he is not free, but cruel. If he sets limits, he is not firm, but cold. Woman then constructs a narrative where any act of masculine autonomy is labeled as a moral failing. In this scenario, man lives trapped in an invisible net. There are no chains, but there is fear. There is no prison, but there is emotional pressure. Every decision is marked by the fear of displeasing, of disappointing, of losing the affection of someone who has learned to use emotions as instruments of power. And the most alarming thing, says Vilar, is that often these women are not even fully aware of what they are doing. They have been socialized to act this way, and the system rewards this behavior. Vilar's conclusion is forceful. Emotional manipulation works because man does not dare to see it for what it is. He confuses it with love, with sensitivity, with femininity. He does not recognize that he is being conditioned, molded, dominated, and as long as that does not change, he will continue to surrender his will in exchange for momentary tranquility that is not peace but his submission in the emotional game between the sexes. According to Ester Vilar, woman does not need weapons or laws. A tear, a word, an absence is enough. And with that, she bends whoever believes they are strong but lives emotionally on their knees. In the culmination of her thesis, Ester Vilar exposes what she considers the ultimate expression of feminine dominance. A perfectly designed system in which man is the one who pays all the bills, who assumes all the responsibilities, who carries all the weight, while woman commands, decides, and benefits without contributing the same level of effort or sacrifice. This unbalanced equilibrium is not the result of chance or historical injustice, but of a carefully maintained structure that turns man into the financier of his own submission. According to Vilar, we live in a society in which most men dedicate their entire lives to working, competing, and ascending, not for their own benefit, but to satisfy the expectations of a woman. He buys a house that she chooses, finances a lifestyle that she imposes, maintains a family whose dynamic she regulates. Every economic decision of man is crossed by the desire to please, sustain, or conquer a woman. And all this without her assuming the same risks or efforts. The author points out that this dynamic would not be possible if it were not naturalized. The system works because everyone believes it is normal. No one asks why man must pay for dinner, the mortgage, or vacations. It is simply assumed that it is his duty. Vilar denounces that this normality is nothing more than a social programming that turns man into the financier of a social contract that does not favor him. He invests, but does not receive proportional gains. He risks, but has no control. Furthermore, woman, far from feeling grateful, acts as the manager of the relationship. She decides what is bought, how money is spent, what it is allocated to. Man, even being the only one who works, must consult before making any personal expense. Vilar compares him to an employee who, after working all month, hands over his salary to a boss who gives him a small allowance. In this logic, the provider is not the one who commands, but the one who obeys. This system also extends to the legal sphere. Vilar states that laws, far from protecting men, often favor women, especially in cases of divorce or child custody. This creates an additional layer of pressure on man, who knows that if the relationship breaks down, he will likely be financially burdened and lose access to his children. This legal framework reinforces his submissive role, as he is forced to maintain a relationship that may no longer be fulfilling, simply to avoid the devastating consequences of separation. In summary, for Ester Vilar, the male submission is a complex and multifaceted phenomenon, rooted in education, reinforced by social norms, and perpetuated by emotional and sexual manipulation. Man, unknowingly, becomes the architect of his own servitude, believing that he is acting out of love or duty, when in reality he is fulfilling a role imposed by a system designed to benefit women. This vision, though harsh, is presented as a necessary awakening for men to reclaim their freedom and autonomy. It is a call to question deeply ingrained beliefs and to recognize the invisible chains that bind them.